Happy New Year from NAAOP. This is Peter Thomas, the General Counsel. As the second session of the 115th Congress begins, we have a tremendous opportunity to try to pass very key provisions of the Medicare Orthotic and Prosthetic Improvement Act of 2017. This is legislation that has been introduced a few times in the last few Congresses. It's a bipartisan bill on both sides, House and Senate, that has received significant support. We've been advocating this as a field, as an O&P community for several years now. There are at least three major provisions that we are really focused on moving and getting included in what they call a Medicare extenders package in the coming weeks. The federal government is expected to shut down on the 19th of January unless Congress passes either a continuing resolution or a spending bill that funds the federal government through the remainder of the year. This is the legislative vehicle that the Medicare extenders package will ride. And we are hopeful to have the O&P provisions of the Medicare Orthotic Prosthetic Improvement Act included in the Medicare extenders package. So we have 2 weeks, very important. Now this deadline may slip, they may continue to kick the can down the road for another month or two, but the bottom line is now is the time to act, to try to send a strong signal of support for this entire bill, but certainly for the following three provisions. The first is clarification that the prosthetist and orthotist clinical notes are recognized as being part of the medical file, part of the patient's file, for purposes of determining medical necessity. This is a long-standing problem. There is legislative language to correct it. It's already passed the House, and the Senate now needs to come forward and support this provision with its own language, and we believe that will make a material difference on some of the audits and appeals that have occurred in the O&P space over the past few years. The second major provision involves off-the-shelf orthotics and whether competitive bidding can be applied to a much broader range of orthotics than Congress ever intended. Just as a refresher, most orthotics and prosthetics, custom fabricated O&P, is exempt from competitive bidding, but off-the-shelf orthotics is not. And the statute defined off-the-shelf orthotics as requiring minimal self-adjustment. The problem is that when CMS regulated that term, they basically wrote the term self out of that definition and expanded the application of competitive bidding to a much wider scope of orthotic care. So this provision, this legislative provision, would restore congressional intent and restore the original definition of off-the-shelf orthotics, thereby limiting the scope of competitive bidding. It's an extremely important provision. And the third provision is to finally convince and to direct CMS to issue final regulations around BIPA Section 427, which links a provider's or a practitioner's qualifications with payment from the Medicare program. This is long-standing federal law, 17, 18 years old, that has never been implemented. The O&P Medicare Improvement Act will direct CMS to issue final regs within 120 days. The CMS did issue a proposed rule in 2017, but ultimately was forced to withdraw it after significant controversy and in the name of regulatory relief for providers. We're counting on you to pick up the phone, to send an email, to do anything you can to send the signal to your congressman or senator, so I should say both your congressman and two senators, of the importance of passing this law in the next 2 weeks and attaching it to the Medicare extenders package. Go to www.naaop.org, go on to the Legislative Action Center. There is a template letter there that you can take and send to your congressman and two senators. Sign your name, of course, electronically if you will. And that's great, but that's not enough. We hope that you also make a phone call. The switchboard number is 202-224-3121, and that will direct you to the zip code where you need to be sent for your House member. There's another phone number, 202-225-3121, and that will get you to the Senate. We very much hope that you'll make contact with your representatives and encourage them to do all they can to support passage of the O&P Medicare Improvement Act, or at the very least, the 3 key provisions I mentioned earlier in the video. Thanks so much. We very much appreciate it. Happy New Year.